we are not in that same place that it's speaking about, and we also cannot act in anything besides really wanting to feel these things, to understand what is he writing. All in all, what do we need to depict to ourselves? What is happening with our desires? Not with our intellect, with our desire. What needs to happen in us so that we will feel that what is written in the study of the 10 Sefirot, that it's working in us. It's truly taking place in us. That's basically our work. And as much as we want more and more for it to happen, to take place in us, together with that, we want to be in connection between us and adhesion with the Creator for Him to shine upon us more, then it will happen. By that, we will advance the lights, like he writes in 155, the intro to Tas. So whoever doesn't understand, doesn't understand. Or whoever it seems to him that he understands, it seems to him he understands, I promise him he too does not understand, because it's speaking about how we want these things for them to take place in us, and we'll feel within the feeling, and then we'll understand, within the feeling, we'll understand what it's speaking about. So let's just simply accept it, that it simply needs to happen in us, and to ask to advance to that through the connection between us and with the Creator.
Yes, we want these things to happen in us. We want to sense, to fully feel how it all happens inside of us. Before we proceed with watching the recording of the lesson, we will remind our friends that we're watching a course, a series of 10 lessons, the Introduction to the Wisdom of Kabbalah from 2003. We're going to begin with lesson 3. We've already watched the first 2 lessons. Each lesson is split into 3 parts, each around 30 minutes long, and today we're going to watch part 1 of lesson 3. Go ahead, we will begin with the recording.
So your question is, how does the Gemar Tikkun, it happens with the creation with the Creator? They return to Him?
No, not quite. The question, I didn't understand. There is the end of the correction of Kelim, and as I understand it, there is in the books it's written that way.
If we learn it simply, it's like this: the Creator created the created being and the desire to receive. Now, if the created being fulfills itself with a desire, the feeling will happen is called pleasure. And by that, it will be filled with the smallest pleasure. Why? Because before it fills itself, let's say at 100 kilos of desire, is hunger. And the moment it fulfills itself, then has no longer this hunger and appetite. Then he doesn't feel pleasure. The pleasure is felt when the light enters into the light in this way, in the place where there's a certain contact, initial contact. And as much as the light enters more and more into the vessel, more and more, and then the pleasure diminishes. You recognize this? You start to eat, and then, where are the pleasures? Do you reach the greatest goodness? Or you save them to the end?
Sometimes like that, sometimes not.
No, in this way, but we save the tastiest things to the end. Why? Because we're already wise about it. The child is not so. The child takes the tastiest thing at the beginning and eats it. But we understand that we want to continue the pleasure. So I will save it. Even at the beginning, even a piece of bread for me is pleasurable because I'm hungry. And afterwards, when I take tastier things, then I'll be able to continue this pleasure, this flavor. Even if the pleasure diminishes, then these greater pleasures I can still accept and I somehow can balance it. So let's see it this way. There is this timeline, and as the pleasure diminishes, so at the beginning I take a small pleasure and I continue it over time. So then it'll give me more time of enjoyment. And this is instinctively, this is how we do it. No one makes such calculations, but that's how we do it. You see this in life. Kabbalah is very simple. We truly see it in our life. So when the pleasure enters into the vessel, and when the light enters into the vessel, we feel pleasure. And to the extent that it fills up the vessel, the pleasure stops. And out of that, we can say the Creator, the desire to receive, He never intended for him to be able to enjoy and the desire to receive, because it's impossible. You fulfill it, you're done. Doesn't feel any more pleasure. This is our error, that we think that through the desire to receive we can enjoy. And it's a mistake of all of humanity. It's just like whoever has 100 wants 200 and so forth. What do? There's no other patent. We simply cannot perceive it, but there's no other trick to it. Unless I take my pleasure and I receive it inside, but because I'm connected with the Creator, let's say with the Creator, it doesn't matter with who's giving me the pleasure. What does it give? Here, I will have a pleasure of 1 gram. It doesn't matter. But when I am connected with this pleasure because someone is great, and because I value him, let's say, a ton's worth, then it turns out then my pleasure becomes that ton. It doesn't matter how much I have pleasure inside, but the fulfillment that I receive comes from him. So here, even if I'm full and I don't receive anything, because I filled myself, but if he's great in my eyes, and to that extent, this pleasure remains in me, meaning there cannot be pleasure if it's only within the vessel and disconnect from the Creator. We have between us this barrier. It's as if like a wall, this curtain between this world and that world. And because we don't see the Creator, then these pleasures in which we can enjoy below the Mahsum is only pleasures, the smallest ones that can be in the desire to receive. It's called a thin light, a very small spark.
Even in the world of infinity, even when we're talking about the 4 phases of direct light, they're also enjoy there. Malchut is fulfilled, and it checks to what extent it can fulfill herself, and but still, it's very small fulfillment, very small pleasure. The purpose of creation is in the beginning of the action. The Creator, from the very beginning, thought that in the pleasure there is going to the fulfillment, the pleasure is going to be with the connection with Him, and not in and of itself. And stemming from the nature of the Kli, that cannot be in principle. If the pleasure fulfills the HaSulam, that efficiency immediately disappears. Therefore, coming to the end of correction, to receive for the sake of bestowal, in connection with the giver, to come to the thought of creation and to adhesion with the creator, whatever you want to call it. The whole wisdom of Kabbalah is essentially a method of the correct reception when I receive not just nardakik, tiny illumination above the mahsom of the creator, but once we pass the mahsom, once we break through it, and together we enter into a mutual sensation with him, there we will reveal him, and then the pleasures that we're going to discover, they're going to be infinite. Why infinite? Because every pleasure that fulfills us, we measure it within our kli. The pleasure that I feel from him is above my kli. I come out of this restriction that we are currently in. This gives the soul, the person, the desire to receive. It gives the soul the ability to live and sense infinite pleasures, truly limitless. Even if you were to receive, let's say, this is essentially about the thought of creation. More questions?
When you speak about the desire to bestow, meaning receiving in order to bestow, so bestowing does not mean giving abundance, literally? Is that what it's meant?
To bestow means to give pleasure, to give delight. It's not that we need to give something that is tangible, but to stimulate another towards fulfillment, towards pleasure, in a direct way or an indirect way, it doesn't matter. But that's what it means to bestow. In spirituality, what is spirituality? It is a special attitude between us, special relationship, that if it exists only in that I am thinking of another, and this is a big problem, gradually we will understand it. It's a big problem to realize that spirituality, it doesn't exist in some faraway, remote place, some concealed, hidden place. It is simply that with very special exercises, we can come to it, we can attain it and feel. Sometimes you study some things, you study a certain profession, and you begin to feel the internal connections within it, how all these different nuances interact and come together. You begin to feel the connections within this material. It seems like this material consists of it, like there's a framework to it. We'll come to this. There will be more exercises that we will do, more articles in addition to Pticha that we're going to study to clarify this. This is the foundation.
When you say creator, do you mean the world of Atzilut or above Atzilut?
What we haven't studied, I don't want to talk about.
In the four phases of direct light, in phase 1 and phase 2, does phase 2 already empty itself of the light?
A very good question. We learn that the dissemination of the light from above downward, the creator, Shoresh, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, and then phase 4, Bchina Dalet, it then begins to work with itself up through phase 4, up until phase 4. we have the 4 phases of the direct light, and this is the development of phase 4. After that, after phase 4 comes out, and in and of itself, it's called creation, creature, created being. And this is phase 4 that now begins to work on itself. What happens here? When from the creator, a light comes out and builds the gleam up through phase 4, which then does a restriction, and then it builds a screen, and then it receives with the help of the screen to the extent that it can. And then essentially we can do it the following way. We can draw it that within sits the creator, and outside there is the first phase, let's say Shoresh, then so there's 0 root, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 Dalet, and then phase 4 feels that it is connected to the creator, and then when it receives from the creator, it performs a restriction, and this is now the restricted phase 4, and then it creates a screen for itself and begins to receive for the sake of bestowal, and this is called the first, second, third, fourth, fifth worlds. And then through the 5th world now begins this world, our world, and then after our world, this is where we exist. And how are we built? We are built from this point in phase 4. This is what we were going to study. What do I want to say here? If you take any point within reality, it doesn't matter where it is located. You need all of these internal parts, all of these components need to be there. Please, everyone, quiet. All of these internal qualities need to be present. Everything that is built up through the creator himself, because in spirituality there is no time. Nothing actually changes. If something needs to happen, then all of the previous causes for that they need to happen first. In other words, if you take some desire, let's say there is a desire in you now to sit just the way that you are sitting now, meaning your body is performing a certain direction. It is fulfilling a desire. We say that from the position that your body is taken right now, that is a desire, and that desire must come down from above. There is no other cause other than the descent of the upper light from the creator through all of these sequences. It comes through all of the worlds down into you, and this whole chain, this whole sequence needs to exist. It's not that it happens somewhere there, and then 1,000 years later it comes to you. No, it is in you now, and it already exists. There is already a direct connection from you to him. There is no desire unless without him. If you focus on the desire itself, from the Kli, you go all the way back to that originating point. Is that all? Okay, great. So we can begin our lesson. Our lesson is the third, lesson 3. And we're going to study today the 5 phases of the Masach, of the screen. You want to take a picture? We have studied that from the creator the light comes out. This light is built across 4 phases of the will to receive, and the will to receive is filled with the light. How was it filled with the light? It began to feel the preceding phases that preceded. It doesn't matter. You have all of these phases that came before it, and then the will to receive by itself, because it received from the preceding phases above it, it begins to now comprise of 4 parts. The 4 parts that came before it, and then the actual will to receive. So phase 4 that came out, it received from the Creator. When it began to receive, there's Shoresh here, the root, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, and phase 4 Dalet that began to receive, it receives from all of the preceding phases. Gimel, Bet, Aleph, Shoresh, Dalet, Gimel, Bet, Aleph, Shoresh. We see here that the phase 4 itself includes all of these preceding phases within. So it has 5 desires. 5 desires. From the great one called Dalet to the very smallest called Shoresh. And Bchina Dalet fills itself with the light to the extent that it fills itself with all of this light, it feels the greatest pleasure. And then when it performs a restriction, it becomes empty. And then Shoresh, Dalet, Gimel, Bet, Shoresh, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, all of these parts now remain empty. Empty, all of them. The light exited. This action is called the first restriction. Does anyone remember what Malchut is called when it was full of light?
Malchut of Ein Sof.
That's right, Malchut of infinity. And Malchut, and once it's empty, the Malchut of restricted Malchut. The Malchut is always called a world. Now, because we have 5 desires within Malchut, this is Malchut. All of Malchut. She has 5 desires, and I have a screen. Then I have 5 desires in the Masach, a screen that sits here in Padarosh. There are 5 parts on each desire, so that each desire would receive for the sake of bestowal, meaning the screen as if gives a reaction to the smallest light in the desire, that the greater light, even greater light, the greater the desire, the greater the light. And then the 5 phases opposite 5 desires we have in the screen, the 5 phases that are in the screen. Then we have 5 slides of Choser, direct light opposite, the reflecting light opposite the 5 lights that are of direct light. Despite the fact that it's just one pleasure, but because there are 5 desires, we feel 5 different pleasures. This is how Malchut receives within herself from all the 5 lights, 5 different pleasures. It receives a portion here. We said here that, let's say she receives 20%. 80% she cannot receive, and only fills herself up to 20%. When Malchut performs this action, we draw it in this way. I'm just repeating what we already studied last lesson. The portion that she thinks with, it's called Rosh. The light comes, she checks how much she can receive for the sake of bestowal and receives a portion within. let's say again, that's 20%, and 80% remains empty. Where does the Masach sit? This place is called Peh. Where does she finish receiving? Where the reception ends, it's called Tabur, and this is Siyum. And this is called Rosh. That's Rosh right here. The portion where it receives is called Toch, and the portion where it does not receive, is called Soch. Together, Toch and Sov are called Guf. Guf and Rosh together are called Partsuf. Partsuf. Essentially, this is called Partsuf or Neshama. It's the same thing. This is a spiritual object. That is what we call it. Now we need to see what is going to happen to Malchut of Infinity that receives the first portion, and then what happens to her. I am moving on to the next drawing.
בואי נתרגל יחד לעשות ציורים טכניים. סך הכל אנחנו לומדים חוכמת קבלה.
Let's get acquainted with technical drawings. You were studying the science of Kabbalah after all. It is a science, so this is how we're going to study. Also, let's get accustomed to technical drawings. We have Malchut. I am drawing it not as a kli, but I am drawing all of our desire from above downward, and I break down this desire into three parts: Rosh, Toch, and Sof. Where is the place where the screen sits is called Peh. I'm not drawing here any cubes, right? And this is Tabur and Siyum. The light comes from above. It wants to enter inside. It's called the direct light, Or Yeshar. Malchut repels it back, and that is called Or Chozer, reflected light. In the Rosh, we have 5 parts. Before Malchut, we have 4 parts, meaning Rosh is essentially the 4 bchinot, the 4 phases of direct light that build this Malchut. There she measures what comes to her and what she can do with it, the 4 phases of direct light. She checks it and receives 20%. She receives 20% of the light, meaning after she makes a calculation in the Rosh, she receives this 20% within, and this light is called Or Pnimi, inner light, the light that enters the Toch of the Partsuf. This is 20%, and what remains on the outside, we said that we have 80% that remains outside, and this is called the surrounding light, because it surrounds the Kli, surrounds all of this Malchut that we drew here, because 80% cannot enter Malchut from Tabur to Siyum. This space remains empty, vacant. It cannot enter. Why can it not enter? Because the screen that sits here in Peh Rosh, the screen, it can receive only 20% for the sake of bestowal. Now, Malchut of Infinity that makes this calculation she makes this calculation to the greatest light, to the greatest pleasure that she has. She herself, here I'm going to draw her here, she comprises of 5 parts. Dalet Gimel Bet Aleph Shoresh. Now she's working with the greatest light that comes to her and wants to receive this light for the sake of bestowal. She receives 20%, cannot receive any more than that. This is the portion that she receives for the first time since the first restriction, and that is called what? Who knows? It is called Galgalta. Let's remember this term. Galgalta. From the word Gulgolet, a skull, meaning the upper part of the head. This Partsuf, we see that there will be many other Partsufim that will follow, many other Partsufim and worlds. After Malchut of Infinity, with the help of the screen, receives 20%. And the light that comes, it sits here in Tabur. Then the surrounding light comes and begins to pressure. Where does it pressure? Precisely in this place of Tabur. Why? Because both of these lights, they want to get through this barrier, to break this barrier. Why do they want to break this barrier? Because the surrounding light wants to enter, because this is where the desire is. The light wants to enter into the desire. Why? How does the inner light relate to the 80% here? Because the inner light only fills the 20%, in the toch. But we know, on our own example, that if I receive a little bit of food, for instance, 20%, but I want to eat 100%, I only receive a little bit, it's much harder for me to control myself, to resist from eating anymore, because the flavors that I received, they weaken the screen. The screen no longer repels, it begins to compromise, to receive a little more, it wants to. Now it has a relationship, an attitude towards receiving, and this 20% that the Partsuf received, it weakens the tabur, and now we have a problem. Both of these worlds, both of these lights, they break through the tabur. The Creator has only one method. Even though there is this pressure at the tabur within the desire, it is the Rosh that does the calculation. Now, what does the Partsuf do? There is no choice. If this barrier is annulled, then it will receive within itself, within the reception. And then nothing, there will be no choice. All of the lights will exit, and the Partsuf will receive nothing. And then the Partsuf is not going to come to the goal of creation. So Partsuf thus discovers, when it receives only a portion, that this is the dead end. There is nothing it can do. The Partsuf is in a state where he cannot move from here. So what does the Partsuf do? The Partsuf repels all the light and moves to a different state. This Partsuf decides, I am moving away from this reception of the light. Let's say this is phase 1, where it receives Kabbalah. And now this is state 2, from state 1 to state 2, when it empties itself. The Partsuf empties itself. How does it do it? It does it in the following way. Let's see here. The light comes, I'm repeating here the same action. The Parzuf repels this light completely. 1, 2. Then it makes a calculation within how much it can receive for the sake of bestowal, and it begins to receive. The light enters inside, a little bit more, a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little more, until it comes to the end. Here there is pressure that is put, pressure of Or Makif surrounding light to the tabur. The tabur does not let it pass further, and then there is a pressure from Or Pnimi and Or Makif. They both pressure the tabur. It's this pressure onto the from both sides onto the tabur. It's called bitush, pnim or makif. It's a kind of term. Bitush, pinam makim. These two lights, they pressure the tabur. This is how we phrase it. Bitush pinam makim. When they pressure the tabur, the Rosh here decides that I am moving away from receiving the light. What does it mean? That receiving the light within the Parzuf was done in this way. First it comes, the second decides that it doesn't want to receive, and the third, it begins to enter the Parzuf into Shoresh, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, and Dalet, the 5 parts within. And here, this is the 20% essentially. And here you have the remaining 80%, where it does not receive. And here you also have Shoresh, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet.